The boy only cut open the whale's belly and was shocked for 3 seconds, because inside the whale's belly was a girl holding a sword. More amazingly, the girl was still alive, but this made Stern even more uneasy, because this girl might not be human. So he asked Julian to watch her, while he went to look up some information. Although Julian was scared, looking at the girl's still charming face, he, who had been single for 18 years, began to blush. He even started fantasizing that when the girl wakes up, she would become his future wife, because he was her savior. Just as he was imagining her giving birth to 11 children who would win the World Cup, the girl suddenly woke up. Julian stuttered, wanting to tell the girl that he had saved her, but was interrupted by her. She asked for his name, and upon learning Julian's name, she very respectfully addressed him as master, and asked him to give her a name. Only then did Julian realize that the girl might have amnesia. Looking at the expectant girl, Julian pondered what name would be good. Just then, he noticed the bracelet hanging by the bedside, so he named her Carnelian, because the girl's pupils resembled that gemstone. Little did he know that the act of naming the girl would completely change both their destinies. Just then, Stern rushed in, wanting to warn Julian not to give the girl a name, because he had found in an ancient book. The girl was a species called seal. They were sealed in various places around the world, only to be awakened by powerful forces. Once a tamer gives her a name, an irreversible contract would be formed. Though they look human, they possess powers sterner than humans, and would only obey their tamer. When their tamer dies, they would fall back into slumber. But Stern was too late. As the runes on the great sword lit up, Carnelian knelt and swore to accept Julian as her master. Stern could only helplessly accept reality, while Julian was innocently punished. But what puzzled Stern was that he had never found any record of a seal being discovered in a whale's belly. However, it was certain that Carnelian was a high-level seal with a weapon, possessing combat power that tens of thousands of regular troops couldn't match. But Carnelian scoffed and said, "You're underestimating me. Tens of thousands aren't enough to fill my teeth. Destroying a country would be just a piece of cake for me." But the two of them couldn't feel any resonance. And Carnelian didn't feel at all that Julian was her tamer. "I don't know why a cook like you could awaken me." Julian felt offended and immediately retorted, "I've already told you that you woke up on your own. I didn't awaken you." Just then Stern said, "Then let's change masters." They could just transfer Carnelian to someone else who could become a tamer. Julian was very satisfied with this solution. This way he could escape his current predicament. But Carnelian asked puzzledly, "Does this little fishing village really have knights?" "Of course not here, but this village is managed by a lord." So Stern invited the lord's foolish son, Cass Trump. The moment he saw Carnelian, he was conquered by her still charming appearance. Drool flowed from the corners of his mouth, full of admiration. After observing her for 2 rounds, he was extremely satisfied with Carnelian's beauty and figure. He even eagerly extended his lecherous hand, wanting to immediately give her a name, but was swatted away by Carnelian, because her current tamer was still Julian, and no one could touch her without his permission. Cass Trump also regained some sense. This frivolous behavior left Julian speechless. Was such a knight really worthy of entrusting? Just then, Cass Trump shouted at him, "What are you dawdling for? Hurry up and start changing masters." So Julian let him give Carnelian a name first. After thinking with his pig-like brain for 2 minutes, Cass Trump excitedly told Carnelian, "Your new name will be Castilla." But no one except himself liked this name. Others asked, "Are you serious?" And next, as long as Julian agrees, the master-changing procedure can be completed. But Julian looked towards Carnelian, wanting to confirm if she was willing to become Cass Trump's servant. But not only did Carnelian show no reluctance, she even urged him to quickly start changing masters. Julian had no choice but to agree. After all, no matter what, a knight was definitely better than a cook. At this moment, Carnelian suddenly lowered her head. Cass Trump thought she was bowing to him. He reached out his palm to caress Carnelian's cheek, wanting to get a good look at his soon-to-be new plaything. But the next second, Carnelian swatted him away, saying irritably, "Get your dirty hands off me, you stupid idiot. It seems my name is still Carnelian." It turned out Julian's power was too weak. He couldn't even give the command to change masters. How did trash like you awaken her then? But Carnelian didn't know the reason either. But he felt relieved at this moment, because this way he wouldn't have to be called by that terrible name, Castilla. But how could Cass Trump let such a fat sheep slip away? So he drew his thin and long weapon, preparing to stab Julian to death. "After all, you're just a lowly person. If I can't get it peacefully, then I'll just take it by force." He even said dying by his sword would be Julian's honor. But just as he was about to stab, Carnelian made her move. Cass Trump's head instantly relocated. "Since you think death is an honor, then go die," she said while gracefully sheathing her great sword. "I'm not wrong, am I, my cook?" By now, Julian was already trembling with fear. Looking at the frightened Julian, Carnelian teased, "So my master is seeing someone being killed for the first time. You'll have to get used to such scenes if you're going to be with me." Seeing Carnelian continuously approaching him, Julian backed away in fear, repeatedly saying, "Don't come near me." Carnelian just calmly said, "No seal would harm their own master. Just relax. Even if you're weak, you're still my master, and if you suddenly die, it would be troublesome for me." Just then, Cass Trump's guards surrounded them, immediately drawing their swords preparing to capture Carnelian. But Carnelian reminded them, "You don't have time to deal with me right now, do you?" Only then did everyone notice. The seal that originally belonged to Cass Trump suddenly became abnormal. One of them even screamed in terror, "The seal has lost connection. We must quickly kill the seal." But before he could finish speaking, a long sword fell on his bald head. Then this seal began the slaughter. No one could stop her. But what was worse, another seal also started losing connection. A guard tried to take the opportunity to kill her, but was blasted 2 meters away by a powerful aura. Julian was very confused. Why did they start fighting among themselves? Carnelian explained that after their master dies, seals instantly lose rationality and attack people around randomly. That's what's called losing connection. When Julian heard that earlier, when she said she'd be in trouble if he died, did she mean she would also lose connection? After getting an affirmative response, Julian asked if there was any way to stop it. But Carnelian told him that seals' minds would return to normal after some time, but before that many people would die. Soon the two seals completely eliminated all the guards. There was no one left who could fight against them. The seals then turned their target to the powerless Julian. Just as the sword was about to pierce him, Carnelian crossed her great sword, easily blocking the strike. Seeing this, the two disconnected seals looked at her fiercely. Looking at her approaching kind, Carnelian was somewhat helpless. Although I don't want to fight seals, but you want to kill my master. So I have no choice but to kill you. The seal used the simplest sword draw. Carnelian directly split her opponent in half. After all, Carnelian was the champion of the 1974 Southeast Asian free fighting competition. But this scene also deeply shocked Julian. Although he had killed hundreds of millions of whales, he had never felt such fear before. The villagers who witnessed all this began to discuss. How could this woman jump so high and kill the powerful seal with one sword strike? What background does she have? Just then someone shouted loudly, "She is Julian's seal." Looking at the corpses everywhere, Julian had already frozen in place. At this moment, he felt all this was fake. But the blood all over him seemed to remind him. This was all real. The strong smell of blood made him vomit. Carnelian walked towards Julian. "Are you okay?" Hearing this, Julian slowly raised his head and said thank you to Carnelian. "Thanks to you, I could survive." But Carnelian told him not to misunderstand. After all, if the master dies, I would also lose rationality and attack others if low-level seals losing connection caused such chaos. What do you think would happen if a high-level seal like me lost connection? But Julian still insisted on saying thank you while vomiting. Carnelian could only sigh helplessly. What a useless master. Not only cowardly, but can't even give a seal command to change masters. Julian could only keep apologizing to her, and promised he would find a way to solve it. 2.5 hours later, the small fishing village returned to peace. The villagers spontaneously began to clean up the aftermath, thoughtfully packaged up the dead, and contacted the one-stop service at the cemetery. Carnelian still charmingly held her great sword, while Julian looked at the distance with some guilt. Just then Stern found them. "What are your plans next?" Carnelian glared at him and asked back. "Do we need any plans? You killed the Lord's foolish son and seals. How could the Lord possibly ignore this?" But Carnelian expressed indifference. "Just a mere regional lord. Even if he mobilizes all his troops, I can solve it in less than a minute." Stern poked himself in frustration. "I'm not asking how quickly you can kill them." "Then do you mean kill them slowly? That will cost extra." Stern sighed helplessly. "Didn't expect you to be so cold-blooded. But think about it. Even if you annihilate all the Lord's troops, there will be sterner troops and seals coming. Very likely troops from neighboring kingdoms will come. Even imperial troops might come." Carnelian just calmly stared at Stern. Mobilizing troops because of a small rural lord's son. They must be really free. Hearing this, Stern shook his head, but that's nobility. To this, Carnelian was still indifferent. "Even if kingdom troops come, I only need 2 days." Before she could finish speaking, Julian interrupted. "That way everyone in the village would die." "So what? Isn't survival of the fittest natural in this world?" Julian clenched his fists unwillingly, saying very unconfidently, "No one thinks they deserve to die just because they're weak." Carnelian raised her arm, pointing to the village. "Why didn't you say such things when that pig was still alive? Do you think he would have spared you? Not only lacking ability, but even your heart is so weak. So what do you plan to do, my master?" Just when everyone didn't know what to do, Julian suddenly said he would go explain the situation to the Lord, asking for forgiveness for this matter. This simple-minded thought instantly amused Carnelian. "How will you explain? Say you killed his son, but still ask for his forgiveness. If it were you, would you agree? Although it's not easy, how would we know without trying?" Just then Stern interrupted the two. "Let me go explain." "Haha, how funny, did you all take the wrong medicine?" But Stern confidently said he could explain everything clearly. Whether it was changing masters or the fighting, it was all an unavoidable situation at the time. "It's more suitable for me to go than Julian." Soon it was twilight. Carnelian stood blankly before the graves of the 2 dead seals. Her eyes revealed barely noticeable sadness. Just then Julian suddenly appeared. Carnelian also changed to a calm expression and asked what he wanted to say. Julian happily told her Stern was back. Carnelian was somewhat puzzled. He actually came back alive. Is he back in one piece? Are his head and limbs still attached? Stern lived up to expectations and brought back good news, but they would have to personally apologize for it to be accepted. Julian was happy like a child. "I knew you could convince the Lord," while Carnelian was somewhat disbelieving. Just an apology would do? What madman in this world would readily accept an apology from his child's killer? Stern accused Carnelian of having 2 extreme thoughts. "Have you only seen humanity's ugly side in your thousands of years? Whatever you think, I'm not interested in such ridiculous things." Julian immediately put on an earnest expression. "Please, Carnelian, just come with me." Seeing this, Carnelian could only sigh helplessly, agreeing to Julian's request. "Since Master says so, I naturally have to comply." So the two set off overnight for the Lord's castle with a small donkey. But during their rest break, they were surprised to learn that Carnelian didn't need to eat to survive. The energy around her was her food, just like how plants can photosynthesize. These strange pieces of knowledge left Julian full of questions. Carnelian could only sigh helplessly. Forget it, you don't need to understand these. But seeing Julian eating his spicy strips with relish, she immediately snatched them away. Weren't you saying you don't need food to survive? Why snatch my spicy strips? There's still my saliva on them. Wouldn't that be like an indirect kiss? Before he could finish speaking, Carnelian spat out the spicy strips, while Julian reached into his backpack, took out spicy strips, and continued chatting with her, curiously asking who her previous master was. Must have been an amazing night, right? But Carnelian suddenly stopped talking, after staying silent for 2 minutes. Carnelian suddenly asked Julian if he knew what privacy meant. Julian was hearing this word for the first time. Is that something like a magic spell? That's right. It's a spell that prevents others from prying into my emotions. I was cast with that magic. So don't ask anymore. Hurry up and eat your spicy strips and go to sleep. With that, she turned around to prepare for sleep. When Julian fell into deep sleep, he didn't know that Carnelian, who was facing away from him, was now too heavy-hearted to sleep. Time came to the next day. The two finally arrived at the Lord's castle. A servant came to receive them, but when he saw Carnelian holding her great sword, he immediately reached out wanting to take away the weapon, saying according to rules, weapons couldn't be brought in. Carnelian glared at him angrily. The last person who touched my sword has already met his ancestors. Are you sure you want to touch it? The servant hurriedly withdrew his hand in fear. Julian quickly tried to persuade Carnelian to follow the rules but was rejected by her. If I can't bring my sword in, then you go apologize alone. Seeing Carnelian so determined, the servant had to compromise, running back to report in a flash. 2 minutes later, he came back smiling to inform the two that the Lord agreed to let them bring in the sword. When the two entered the castle, they finally met the Lord, who was waiting for them, but there were many servants by his side. Julian politely bowed to the Lord. The Lord said with a gloomy face, "I've heard about your matter." Julian immediately knelt down. "We came to apologize to you about your son." But the Lord didn't speak, just waved his hand asking Julian to come closer. But when Julian was walking towards the Lord, Carnelian's eyes kept watching him. She didn't expect the Lord to be so reasonable. But seeing Julian walking very slowly, the Lord stood up and quickly walked towards him. The next second, the Lord suddenly grabbed Julian's neck and lifted him up. "So you're called Julian, right? Do it." After speaking, the servants behind him immediately took action, surrounding Carnelian and casting sealing magic. It turned out those servants were actually disguised magicians. As they chanted spells, chains appeared out of thin air and firmly bound Carnelian. As the chains gradually tightened, Carnelian also showed a painful expression. At this time, both were completely under the Lord's control, and the Lord revealed a secret to Julian that devastated him. Stern said as long as the village could be saved, it would be fine. As for you, this orphan, use your life to repay the village's kindness in raising you. Although Stern was born in such a poor, remote place, he's quite clever, isn't he? After saying this, he threw Julian hard. After sliding 2 meters, Julian directly fainted. What a fool, actually daring to come here voluntarily. But just as the Lord was preparing to follow the plan, first seal Carnelian, then take Julian's life, Carnelian got angry. I knew it would be like this. A rural lord's thoughts are very easy to guess, aren't they? Still talking tough in this situation? After the sealing is complete, I will. But before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Carnelian. Then she broke 2 chains. You mean this? The next second, her great sword burst forth with powerful energy, breaking all the chains. You think you can trap me with such crude things? As the sword tip touched the ground inscribed with magic rays, the surrounding magicians were directly blasted away by the powerful energy. All instantly fainted. The Lord was greatly shocked. How could this be? How are you not following the script? Did you knowingly walk into this trap? You just realize now? You should have guessed this outcome when your pig-like son died. But the Lord didn't plan to give up, so he immediately called for his secret weapon, while Carnelian suddenly raised her great sword, throwing it towards the dark corner behind the Lord, then amazingly hit someone. This little rat wouldn't happen to be your secret weapon. With the death of the Lord's secret weapon, the Lord finally felt fear. Looks like you're the real fool. Then Carnelian began chanting spells. Energy from the surroundings continuously gathered towards her. The Lord finally realized the seal before him was actually a high-level one proficient in both physical and magical combat, while Carnelian calmly said, "Disappear." The next second, a huge burst of energy shot skyward. The entire castle began to shake. After a huge explosion sound, the entire Lord's castle was razed to the ground. When Julian woke up, he found Carnelian had been protecting him, but the scene before him made him somewhat panicked, so he asked where the Lord was. Carnelian raised her hand pointing in a direction, but it made Julian greatly shocked, because there was only ruins there. After this incident, Julian finally grew up a bit. "So you knew from the beginning this was a trap?" Carnelian calmly told him. "You understand the principle that like father like son, right? The Lord like his son wasn't any good person. Moreover, keeping such a guy would only cause headaches later. So from now on, don't have such useless sympathy." But the next second, Carnelian prepared to leave with an unfriendly face. After all, there's still one person to deal with. In the night fishing village, the villagers were discussing. Why was Julian's seal preparing to kill Stern? Weren't they close enough to share underwear? Suddenly, Carnelian spoke. "I allow you to say 2 last words." Stern closed his eyes as if already accepting his fate, but still said something that Carnelian found laughable. "To save the village, I really had no choice." Hearing Carnelian was going to kill Stern, the always slow Julian was shocked. "You didn't say you would kill him, Carnelian." He also had no choice but to make such a choice for the village. But Carnelian asked him back, "Would you do the same in his position?" Using having no choice as an excuse to ease your guilty conscience. How disgusting. Hearing this, Julian couldn't refute, because he really wouldn't do that. But even so, he didn't want Stern to lose his life for this. So he pushed away Carnelian's great sword, requesting as her master to spare Stern. But Carnelian again pointed her sword at the ashamed Stern. Human nature is selfish. Weren't you curious about who my previous masters were? For thousands of years, my body and heart have been constantly defiled by those people, forever only being used by so-called masters, then falling into slumber. This is my sad fate as a seal. Seeing Carnelian break the secret magic seal, speaking out the secret hidden in her heart, Julian gently grabbed her hand. Although I don't know what you've been through, but I won't do the same things. I will help you. Please believe me. Hearing this, Carnelian fell silent, then sighed helplessly. But the next second, her tone suddenly changed. Fine, I won't kill him. How can a master beg a seal? I almost died from embarrassment. Hearing he wouldn't be killed, Stern guiltily said thank you to her. And Julian also chose to forgive him. Although I still can't believe you betrayed me. But I believe you were really thinking for the village. Just then, Carnelian suddenly said, you said you would help me, right? But Julian replied he didn't know what to do, but he would do his best at anything within his ability. While Carnelian demanded that he first become a knight, then find her a rich and excellent knight master. Julian felt like he had been cuckolded, but also felt it was reasonable. But Carnelian looked into the distance and continued, we need to go to the city first. There will be ways once we get there. Just then Stern told them a merchant was returning to the city tomorrow. They could take his carriage to leave, and promised to prepare for their long journey. But Carnelian didn't seem very appreciative. Left without acknowledging Stern, only Julian looked back reluctantly. But Stern lowered his head in shame. Little did they know this farewell would leave them with no chance to meet again. The next morning, Carnelian changed into new clothes. Even she felt great, but was somewhat dissatisfied with Julian. Why did you bring so many things? Julian proudly said humans are different from seals. There are many things to prepare. As the clip-clop sound approached, the merchant's carriage stopped in front of them. Carnelian asked the merchant where had the most knights, and they must be proper knights. After thinking for a while, the merchant suggested they go to Beersheba because there would be a royal duel there in a week. The so-called royal duel was fighting in front of the king. It was dueling where knights killed each other to attract the king's attention. These words startled the merchant, because such words would certainly cause big trouble if heard by knights. But Carnelian was very contemptuous of so-called knights. Worst case, just kill them with one sword. But the merchant was going to Slock, then suggested they could take a ship there. That way they could reach Beersheba before the duel began. So the two followed the merchant towards Slock. But Julian had a bitter face all the way. He didn't expect to suddenly leave the village where he had lived since birth. Hearing Julian say this, Carnelian also fell into thought, then said partings always come unexpectedly. But Julian was again full of question marks, completely not understanding what she meant. This made Carnelian somewhat embarrassed. Didn't expect communication to be so difficult. Then comforted him, just treat it as taking a trip. After all, once we find a way to change masters in the city, you can return to that small village again. Soon the two arrived at the port, but there were no seats on the ship, and the next ship would only come back after the duel ended. So Carnelian decided to knock out a few people, then sneak onto the ship, but was vetoed by Julian. Then should we just hijack the entire ship? Hearing this, Julian was sweating cold sweat. That's not what I meant. I'm telling you not to do such outrageous things. Just then, Julian heard people nearby discussing. Lord Castro's castle suddenly disappeared. He quickly whispered to Carnelian, we better keep a low profile. It's better to leave quietly. Just when they had no solution, a figure walked towards them. Excuse me, I accidentally overheard your conversation. Do you need a ship to Beersheba? We happen to have 2 empty spots on our ship going there. But just as Julian was about to say they needed it, Carnelian fiercely looked at the newcomer and said, accidentally? All the ship owners here say they have no spots while you let us board. The man nervously expressed, if you reject my goodwill, then there's nothing I can do. Julian suddenly interrupted Carnelian's interrogation and expressed that they wanted to arrive before the royal duel began. Can we see the ship first? The man immediately happily expressed, of course. But you need to seize the opportunity. After all, finding a ship to Beersheba at this time is harder than picking stars. So, under Julian's persuasion, the tired and irritated Carnelian had to follow him. Really don't know whether to call him kind or ignorant. Little did they know Carnelian's suspicion would prove true again. Because the man was Bernie, a member of the smuggling ship, and now the two had become prey in his eyes. At this moment, Carnelian was very reluctant to follow Julian onto the smuggler's ship. But Bernie told them, unfortunately, you two can't stay together. Men and women must stay separately on our ship. The two immediately became awkward, with Julian quickly explaining that they weren't that kind of relationship. But Bernie mischievously looked at Carnelian saying, oh, so you haven't defined your relationship yet, making them even more awkward. Then Bernie showed them to their rooms. While he was leading Julian to his quarters, he kept smirking at Carnelian. When Julian arrived at his accommodation, he found everyone looking listless. Suddenly the door slammed shut, startling Julian. He tried to open the door, but a man told him that the doors would remain locked until the ship departed. Because the ship wasn't registered, meaning if anyone on board disappeared, no one would know. Julian then realized he might have encountered the legendary human trafficking ring, and immediately thought of Carnelian. He desperately tried to break open the door, but to no avail. Just then he noticed a box nearby, so he used the box to break the door lock, and immediately ran out to look for Carnelian. But after searching all the rooms, he couldn't find her. Just then there was a rumbling sound, and Julian immediately sensed something was wrong. He rushed towards the deck, constantly praying in his heart. Please, Carnelian, don't destroy the ship, or we won't be able to get to Beersheba. When he burst onto the deck, Carnelian happily waved at him. I didn't expect my master to be so gutsy, actually knowing to break down the door to escape. Did you come to save me? Of course not, I came to stop you. Hearing this, Carnelian looked hurt. Did you think I would destroy this ship? I just felt something was odd, so I investigated and found these guys look like human traffickers. That's why I took action. But just then, Bernie crawled out from the crowd, shouting that they weren't. Meanwhile, the stowaways also came out from the cabin. But instead of thanking Carnelian, they started accusing them. "You're so mean. What did you do to the crew?" This sudden accusation left Carnelian confused. It turned out Bernie and his crew were just disguising these people as contraband, charging minimal fare to transport them to Beersheba, because the Empire of Beersheba had very strict screening for poor people. Learning the truth, both felt guilty. Fortunately, Bernie didn't pursue the matter. After all, he hadn't explained things to them earlier. But Bernie was also very curious about their identities. Carnelian immediately claimed she was a seal, while Julian was an apprentice knight. She made sure to emphasize that Julian was just an apprentice knight, heading to Beersheba for important business. Though this knight looks foolish. As you can see, I'm really powerful. But just then, Bernie interrupted her. Don't you know that during the period of royal duels, they specially prepare ships for knights, with free private rooms and all kinds of high-end cuisine? Carnelian was shocked. They're such a good deal. If I had known, I would have had him pose as a knight from the beginning. Just then, Bernie told the two, "We don't have such treatment on our ship, and you'll have to pay for causing this disturbance." Julian quickly explained that he had already spent all his money on the fare. Hearing this, Bernie tilted his head and smiled. "If you don't have money, let's try something else." 2.5 hours later, Julian was seriously stirring a pot, while Carnelian had transformed into a service waitress. The crew members were heartily eating whale legs. "Eat slowly. If we run out of whale, I'll go catch more for you." Much later, Carnelian could finally rest. These crew members really could eat. We just haven't had such delicious food in a long time. Besides, for a knight to be such a good cook, he's really amazing. Hearing this, Carnelian instantly burned with anger. It's not that he can cook in addition to other things, cooking is all he can do. Then she calmed down and asked Bernie, "Is this enough to make up for our mistake?" But Bernie refused. "This isn't enough." Just as Carnelian was about to get angry, Bernie cheerfully said, "After eating and drinking, we need some entertainment." Then everyone started arm wrestling with Carnelian, though they were clearly asking for trouble. 2.5 days later, they arrived at Beersheba. After saying goodbye to Bernie, the two came to the bustling market district. Julian, entering a big city for the first time, was very curious. He kept looking around at all the novel sights, which annoyed Carnelian with his inexperience. She reminded him again about pretending to be a knight. After all, Bernie had said knights could eat and drink for free here, but Julian hadn't heard a word, instead pointing ahead in shock. There appeared a beast man, something Julian had never seen before. But this really angered Carnelian. "When I'm talking, you need to listen carefully." But then she patiently explained to Julian, after all, it was his first time seeing an orc. The so-called orcs were one of the other races. Although they weren't originally such docile creatures, they became tame after being captured and trained by humans. And not just orcs, humans had long ago captured fairies, cave giants, and other races to use as slaves. Hearing this, Julian suddenly stopped walking, because he thought humans were being cruel. Just then, the entire street suddenly started shaking. People around panicked and shouted, "It's Lord Kudro!" The next second, a huge elephant walked towards Julian. Everyone fearfully knelt down. Only Julian stood there foolishly. But this also angered Kudro. In his eyes, lowly people should kneel before him. So he ordered the elephant to trample him to death. But after a tremendous boom, the elephant's foot hadn't stomped down as expected, instead being held up by Carnelian with one hand. The elephant was terrified, as this wasn't strength a human should possess. The next second, Carnelian raised her great sword, then leaped high, with just one slash splitting the elephant in half. The merchant Kudro fell to the ground pathetically, his face full of terror. Carnelian fixed her disheveled hair. What lowly merchant dares to block a knight's path? Julian was about to remind Carnelian that he wasn't a knight, but was warned by her to shut up. Hearing that the other party was a knight, the merchant trembled uncontrollably, unable to understand why a knight would deliberately block his way. Just then, a great sword pointed at him. "Hey, stupid merchant, who gave you permission to speak with that lowly mouth?" Julian felt dejected, not understanding how things had turned out this way, while Carnelian seemed to be really enjoying herself. Just then, Carnelian said, "Fortunately, my knight master is unlike you. He's very magnanimous, so try begging for mercy. If you kneel, he might spare your life." But Kudro not only refused to apologize, but accused Carnelian of being too despicable, attacking when he was completely defenseless. Carnelian thrust her sword tip forward. "So, you want me to just kill you instead?" Kudro immediately shut his mouth. Then he glared at Julian maliciously. "I challenge you to a duel. 3 days from now, I'll wait for you at the royal duel grounds." With that, he fled pathetically. As he ran, he kept shouting, "Don't you dare run away!" This scene made Carnelian laugh out loud. Look at how stupid he looks. But Julian was terrified, because in a duel wouldn't he be done for? Carnelian told him not to worry, because the duel Kudro mentioned was actually a battle between seals. With that, she put away her great sword. Looking at her dirty self, Carnelian thought they should first find lodging and get cleaned up. But this made Julian panic, because his pockets were as empty as his face. With such a ruthless wandering knight like you around, do we need to spend money? Then they came to a knights-only inn, where people immediately recognized them. Everyone was whispering, saying they heard Kudro had almost lost his life. The staff very carefully checked them in, saying they would definitely serve them comfortably. Julian was about to speak, but got punched by Carnelian. She could guess with her little toe that he was going to say he wasn't a knight again. Then she very concernedly supported him. "How terrible, Sir Knight. Has your wound opened up again?" The next second, Carnelian viciously said, "Didn't I tell you to pretend to be a knight? Just try saying no one more time." Then she tightly held Julian's neck to keep him quiet, while smilingly asking the staff to quickly process their check-in. Then the two came to their room. But Julian seemed troubled. "Isn't it inconvenient for us to share a room?" Seeing his shy expression, Carnelian chuckled. "I didn't expect you to have such dark thoughts. Though you were like this on the ship too. You really are stupid, wanting to stay separately from a seal. You should know that for a knight, a seal is like their sword and shield, something to keep by their side at all times." With that, Carnelian started looking for something. 2.5 hours later, Julian was boredly eating an apple when he was attracted by a languid voice. He saw Carnelian, fresh from her bath, comfortably stretching. Seeing Julian's face turn red. "How did your clothes end up like that?" It turned out the inn's provided clothes had been modified by Carnelian. "That old-fashioned style doesn't suit me. I'm very avant-garde after all." With that, she started teasing Julian, scaring him into quickly turning his head away. His face red as he said she was going too fast. "I want to get off this ride. What are you afraid of? You're supposed to be a ruthless wandering knight." But just as Carnelian was preparing to rest, she suddenly stood up, because she sensed a powerful presence approaching. Then a voice sounded outside the door. "Sir Knight, are you inside? Sorry to disturb your rest, but Knight Lai hopes to meet with you both." It turned out that when Carnelian arrived in Beelsheba, Lai's seal had sensed her presence, and seemed quite familiar with her, and guessed that someone who could awaken her must be the Empire's most powerful knight. So Dietrich planned to visit them before the royal duel began, to see for himself just how strong this knight was. While Carnelian had heard of the Dietrich Willengel Tauen Wuen Muben Osas family, that famous knightly family of the Empire, though unsure why they suddenly came, at least she sensed no killing intent, but Carnelian still picked up her great sword ready to fight. While Julian, hearing there was no killing intent, directly invited them in, but this sudden action startled Carnelian, but it was too late to stop him. Fortunately, the two who entered were very respectful, directly stating their purpose, just visiting the famous knight. Thanks to Carnelian's coaching, Julian somewhat embarrassedly admitted he was that knight. But to lie, this didn't look like a powerful knight at all. Fortunately, Carnelian keenly noticed this point. After all, Julian looked like a complete country bumpkin who knew nothing of knightly etiquette. To dispel Lai's doubts, Carnelian immediately said, "My master belongs to no country, just a free knight in training, so he's very wary of revealing his family name." Julian played along, quickly inviting the two to sit and talk, but this made Lai believe even more that they must be hiding something. This sword was not only clumsy but had no blade. Everyone thought it had no killing power, but it could not only kill pigs, but easily split an elephant in half. This also made Julian very curious. Could it be that the sword stance and footwork determined its killing power? But Carnelian said, "The true blade lies in the heart of the wielder. Even the sharpest treasure sword, if the heart is dull, couldn't cut even a leaf. And for me, what's most important is precisely that it has no edge. That way I can sleep while hugging it. Super cool in summer." And it also had a very cool name, Mad Sword Mistral. Carnelian could feel that this guy liked the name. Just then, Lai and his seal came to greet them, and very concernedly told them to be careful in the duel. Carnelian happily greeted them back, saying there was nothing to be careful about. This kind of small match wasn't even a warm-up for her. It turned out the two had bonded over drinks at last night's gathering, becoming good girlfriends. A drunk Carnelian had almost revealed Julian's fake knight status. As the match began, Carnelian walked into the dueling grounds, while Julian and Kudro sat in the viewing stands. His seal was a fat man named Gashak, whose terrible stench made Carnelian somewhat unbearable. Her disgusted expression instantly angered Gashak, so he launched the first attack, then smashed his axe down hard where Carnelian had been. But as the dust cleared, Carnelian was no longer there. Instead appearing behind him, "Are you taking after your master? Your movements are really too slow." Gashak immediately swung his axe backward, but missed again. Carnelian leaped high, doing 2.5 flips before landing steadily. But this drew boos from the audience. "Don't just keep running away, fight him." I heard she was a high-level seal. Looks like that was just a rumor." Little did they know it wasn't that Carnelian didn't want to fight, but she was sickened by the smell and didn't want to get close to her opponent. But Gashak hadn't stopped, swinging his axe at Carnelian again. This time Carnelian didn't dodge far, instead sidestepping his attack, then delivering a whip kick to Gashak's bottom. That casual kick sent him sprawling to the ground. "I'm not running away, it's just your smell makes me want to stay far from you." But these words stimulated Gashak again. He raised his axe and leaped high, swinging down at Carnelian again, but Carnelian blocked it with one hand. "You didn't really think you could beat me, did you?" With that, she casually waved, sending Gashak's axe flying. The next second, Gashak suddenly knelt down and surrendered. Carnelian directly aimed her arrow at his heart. "Looks like you're only suffering because you followed the wrong master." Hearing this, Gashak suddenly started trembling, thinking Carnelian was going to kill him. but Carnelian put away her arrow. Ending it like this would be too boring. Let's write a magnificent ending. The next second, Carnelian started chanting magic spells. Then a huge burst of energy shot skyward. The audience was completely thrilled. She could even use high-level magic. When the chanting ended, countless fireballs fell from the sky. Carnelian was shocked. This isn't my doing. And those fireballs were indiscriminately attacking the dueling grounds. People started fleeing in panic, but the more chaotic it got, the harder it was to escape. Just as the fireballs were about to fall, a barrier suddenly appeared. Icarus arrived just in time to save everyone, buying them time to escape. Just then, Nightlie shouted, "Everyone take cover, the enemy country has launched a surprise attack." With that, she quickly joined the battle, and soon controlled the situation. But her next decision shocked Seal Icarus. She decided to support the fallen city walls alone, while arranging for Icarus to defend against the enemy's airstrikes. Because blocking the siege weapons required his defensive barrier. Icarus could only reluctantly agree, but for Nightlie's safety, Icarus enchanted her weapons with defensive magic. Looking at the enchanted weapon in her hand, Lie gave Icarus an order. "If I die, go find another master. In war, you never know what might happen, and no one can resist you in an unlinked state." Icarus closed his eyes reluctantly and bowed, then rushed off to his battlefield. Nightlie looked up at the battlefield ahead, her eyes full of determination, then quickly went to provide support. Meanwhile, Carnelian was leisurely eating snacks. Julian suddenly asked, "Why did Lady Lie refuse our help?" It turned out that at the dueling grounds, Carnelian had easily dealt with the enemy forces that charged in. She was very unhappy about them disrupting her duel, so she asked Nightlie if she needed help. Unexpectedly, Lie refused. As a knight of Lisenbell, she could handle it herself, and told them to retreat to the inn first. It was in the inner city, and still safe for now. To this, Carnelian explained, "Knights are people who stake their lives on what they protect. But we've been saying you're a free knight, and free knights are people who don't apply that conviction to countries. It can be a narrow-minded heart, or it can be the way of knighthood. Asking a free knight to help your country is like asking someone to temporarily set aside their own convictions." Then Carnelian changed her tone. "Besides, if you want to get involved without having the strength, that's just meddling." Julian could only lower his head in frustration. Seeing this, Carnelian smiled and said, "But you have a super strong seal that doesn't match your abilities." Hearing this, Julian stared wide-eyed in disbelief. Carnelian responded with a smile. Meanwhile, on the tense battlefield, with Nightlie joining in, the situation was quickly brought under control, but not far away, a figure was watching Lie. She really hasn't changed at all, whether before or now, still looking fragile yet incredibly strong. Then he drew his sword and charged at Lie. Lie's sixth sense made her detect the danger. She immediately turned and swung her sword. The man smiled and said, "Long time no see, Lie." Lie held her sword with both hands, struggling to block, and angrily said, "So it's you, Jared." This sword was covered in poison, but Lie didn't dodge, instead blocking it with her arm, because only she could stop Jared now. And the longer this dragged on, the worse it would be for them. So Lie didn't block with her sword, but thrust her sword hard into Jared's kidney. But this attack wasn't completely successful, only causing Jared superficial damage. But this shocked him. He hadn't expected Lie would sacrifice herself to try to kill him. Meanwhile, the poison began spreading rapidly. Lie's body could no longer move. Jared seized the opportunity, preparing to deliver a fatal blow to Lie. But just as he charged forward with his sword, his seal showed a terrified expression, warning him of approaching danger. The next second, something crashed down hard in front of Jared. As the dust gradually cleared, two figures slowly appeared. There stood Carnelian holding her great sword, saying, "Aren't you two a bit too much, ganging up on one person when you're both grown-ups?" Seeing Carnelian, Lie was very surprised. She hadn't expected the wandering knight Julian would choose to help. Carnelian raised her sword, saying, "Let me end this battle." Seeing Carnelian, Karina was shocked, because the person before her was the enemy who had killed her previous master. Now, with her enemy before her eyes, Karina angrily shouted, "I'll kill you!" With that, she swung her fist at Carnelian, but was easily blocked by the great sword. "Isn't your greeting a bit too rough?" But when she saw the other's appearance, her eyes showed some shock, so she swung her sword to force Karina back, then asked, "I think I've seen you somewhere before, so you still remember what you did?" But just as Karina was about to attack again, she was stopped by Jared. Carnelian's appearance had disrupted his plans. Their side was now at a tactical disadvantage, so he immediately decided to abandon the battle. But Karina didn't want to give up this chance for revenge. Hearing this, Jared sternly questioned, "Are you planning to disobey my orders? Do you want to die?" As a seal, Karina could only reluctantly accept Jared's command. Seeing Carnelian's disdainful look, Karina said hatefully, "Just you wait, I'll come find you soon." All right, I'll wash up and wait for you." As Jared led his people away, this battle also ended. When he returned to Hemon's military camp, Commander O'Neill angrily questioned why he didn't keep his promise. Their side was about to break through the enemy's defenses. But Jared retorted, "You're the one who broke the promise. Besides Lie and Icarus, there was another seal there, and a highest level one at that." O'Neill was shocked. "You mean Lisenbell has another knight as powerful as Lie?" Hearing this, Jared berated him. "You're really useless, not even fully grasping the enemy's combat strength." O'Neill then realized that rumored ruthless wandering knight had perhaps decided to pledge loyalty to Lizenbell. At this, Jared told O'Neill the contract was void, and mockingly told him, "You can spread word that I ruined this sure victory." After all, it would be too cruel if the weak weren't even allowed to brag. Meanwhile, though Lai was out of mortal danger, she needed to return to the royal city quickly to completely cure the poison. But what troubled her most was why Jared would appear before her as an enemy mercenary. He was talking about having me bear his children just 2.5 years ago. Just then, a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Someone brought a fruit basket to visit Lai, and they were told they needed to go to Lizenbell's royal city because His Majesty wanted to express gratitude to the two who had protected Bathsheba. Unexpectedly, Julian suddenly confessed he wasn't a knight, just a cook who could kill whales. But Knight Lai wasn't surprised at all, saying she had guessed it already. But your help to Lizenbell was an undeniable fact. Carnelian also advised from the side, "Go accept the praise, you'll definitely get a big reward." Then she raised her hand to ask Lai, "I see you and Jared seem to know each other. You seem to be fighting to the death but didn't really want to kill each other." Seeing Knight Lai lost in thought, Carnelian hurriedly said it was fine if she wasn't comfortable talking about it. It turned out they not only had the same master, but had once been engaged. Just as Julian was curious why they became enemies, Carnelian suddenly sensed a dangerous presence. Icarus quickly moved to protect Lai. The next second, the window started shattering. Carnelian immediately grabbed Julian to dodge, while Icarus quickly deployed a protective shield. Then Jared appeared with his seal. "I've come to settle this, Lai. Raise your sword." Just as Carnelian was about to help, a fist suddenly came at her. Though she barely dodged it, her face was still injured. Karina continued attacking without pause, and drove Carnelian out of the room. For a moment she was overwhelmed, looking at Karina who had followed. Carnelian was very angry. "Are you really serious?" Meanwhile, Jared raised his sword saying, "The interfering ones are gone. Do you think this puppet seal can stop me?" Just then Lai ordered Icarus to protect Julian. The battle with Jared had to be ended by herself. This arrangement also surprised Jared. He hadn't expected Lai to be so composed while injured, but he wasn't one to show mercy to women. Lai, with unresolved poison, couldn't possibly match him. Jared even gloated that Knight Lai would die here today, yet he hesitated to deliver the final blow. Looking at the panting Lai, Jared couldn't help but mock her. "Look at how helpless you are now, what a waste of the Blue Raptor title." With that, he slashed at Lai again, knocking the weapon from her hand. Lai could no longer fight, falling to her knees. The next second, Jared's sword pointed at her. Now Lai was actually finished. But just as he raised his sword to strike, his sword was knocked away. Icarus had broken his resonance with Lai, disobeying her orders to intervene. Lai asked in disbelief how he had done it. Icarus explained that seals must protect their master no matter what. But this also angered Jared, who swung his fist at Icarus. Icarus immediately raised a defensive shield. But under Jared's continuous punches, the shield was finally broken. Icarus was badly injured. Just as Jared was about to kill him with one sword strike, Lai suddenly appeared and knocked him back. "Aren't I the one you're looking for? So leave others alone." Seeing Lai's fighting spirit restored, Jared suddenly lowered his sword. Then he suddenly started laughing. "Finally, you show me the face I know, the human Lai hidden behind the knight's mask." With that, he actually sheathed his sword and left. But after he left, Lai found something left on the ground, and this was Jared's antidote. Now the two were preparing to head to the royal city, unaware that this journey would be extremely dangerous. It turned out that far away in Hespabakong, the emperor had already received orders from the first emperor of Oban Bahar to capture Carnelian alive, and had sent out the country's high-level knight, who possessed 2 high-level seals. Capturing the current Carnelian for him was almost overkill. Carnelian looked at Julian, who hadn't spoken the whole way, feeling guilty. Could she have gone too far? It turned out that last night, Julian had asked Carnelian if her previous name was Jurong. Although Carnelian admitted it, she refused to tell Julian about her past. Julian hadn't pressed further. She thought the matter had passed, but apparently it hadn't. Just as Carnelian didn't know what to do, Julian suddenly spoke up. "I'm so tired, Carnelian. Will there really be a village on the way?" Carnelian finally realized he was just too tired to talk, so she immediately pointed ahead, saying, "It's just 2.5 kilometers away. You'll definitely make it before you die." When the two finally arrived at the village, unexpectedly they were targeted. Hey, you two. If you want to enter this village, you'll have to pay a toll first. If you don't have money, that sword taller than me will do." Looking at this bluffing kid, Carnelian couldn't help but laugh out loud. This action also annoyed Raspel. "Don't laugh. I'm Blue Raptor Lady Lai's most beloved knight." But this just made Carnelian laugh even harder. "Master, look at this little one's extraordinary spirit. You should learn from him." Raspel said angrily, "No matter how crazy this world gets, underage children can't possibly become knights. If you keep lying, you'll be disciplined by that knight over there." Hearing that Julian was a knight, Raspel's eyes immediately lit up. "Are you really a knight, sir? Please guide my archery. I must become stronger, because I have people I need to protect." But Julian sadly refused him, telling him he wasn't actually a knight. When they got to the inn later, Carnelian asked Julian why he refused the child's request, as it didn't match his soft-hearted nature. Julian said dejectedly, "He looked so sincere, I couldn't deceive him. I won't pretend to be a knight anymore, because being a knight isn't something you can fake with just words. Besides, being a cook isn't bad after all. I got us such a nice room in exchange for helping with cooking tomorrow, right?" Carnelian wiped some dust from the room and said with disgust that this was really nice indeed. To lighten the gloomy mood, Carnelian suggested getting a drink. Julian said he had never drunk alcohol before. "Well, then there's nothing we can do, since you're still a child. I'll go by myself." Hearing this, Julian got very angry. "You're the child who's lived for over 2,000 years. It's just alcohol. I can drink forever." Seeing this, Carnelian showed a victorious smile. 2.5 minutes later, Julian suddenly felt the whole world spinning. Carnelian laughed and said, "Maybe it's not the world that's spinning, but something else?" Julian directly retorted, "You're right, it's not the world spinning, it's you spinning." With that, he crashed face first onto the bar counter. Now it's not spinning anymore. Just as Carnelian was lamenting how bad his alcohol tolerance was, a man suddenly approached, trying to hit on her. He only got told to get lost, but the man didn't leave, and reached out his lecherous hand. Seeing this, Carnelian looked at him with murderous intent. The man was scared and quickly backed away. "Then I'll come back when you don't want to drink alone." But after the man left, the innkeeper was staring at Carnelian from afar. When discovered by Carnelian, he hurriedly turned his head away. This made Carnelian very puzzled. Could she be overly sensitive from drinking too much? The beautiful singing fairy before us is the top performer here. All fairies are born singers. Though a male fairy, he possesses beauty surpassing even female fairies. That's how Melquint became the star performer here. But his tragic past and slave status fill his songs with sorrow. Even passing dogs would cry upon hearing them. But thankfully, someone has always protected him, giving him a glimmer of hope in his miserable life. The next day, Julian wakes up from his hangover. The owner harshly orders him to cook, but just as he's showing off his skills, Melquint suddenly appears in the kitchen and asks him for a drink of water. Looking at Melquint, who maintains grace even while drinking water, Julian's weathered face unexpectedly turns red. This woman is incredibly stunning. Just then, Raspel suddenly appears, having come to find Melquint. Upon seeing Julian, he angrily points and shouts, "You sneaky fake knight! What tricks are you trying to play on my Melquint?" Fortunately, Melquint quickly explains that he came for water himself, which makes Raspel drop his hostile attitude. But he still waves his wooden sword, warning Julian, "If you dare bully Melquint, I'll stab you with my sword." Then proudly tells Melquint, "I'll stake my honor as a knight to protect you." He bids farewell to Melquint and happily runs off to practice swordsmanship. But just as he reaches the door, he bumps into someone. The person is that same man who tried to harass Carnelian. "Watch where you're going, you brat." But when he sees Melquint, he immediately whistles, "Isn't this the fairy from yesterday?" Getting closer, he remarks that there's more than just grace about him. His offensive manner makes Raspel very angry. He raises his wooden sword and strikes the man from behind. Though the blow isn't strong, it's extremely insulting. The man angrily knocks Raspel to the ground with one punch, but Raspel shakily stands up again, raising his sword to shield Melquint. The confused man decides to drop his act. Drawing his weapon, he says menacingly, "Do you know who I am? I'm Jared the Fierce, who kills children without blinking. Today I'll cut off your hand so you can never wave that sword around again." Just then, Julian angrily shouts, "Stop, you imposter! Who gave you the courage to impersonate Jared? I saw him clearly when he drew that demonic sword in Bellissima." Hearing this, the man sneers, "You say you were at that battlefield? One look and I can tell you're just a third-rate cook. What a braggart." Hearing himself called a third-rate cook, Julian decides to drop his act. "I am Julian, the wandering knight who saved Bellissima." But hearing this, the man bursts into laughter. "If you're that knight, I'll eat my own shit standing on my head." Then switching to a malicious smile, "If what you say is true, then let me test this legendary wandering knight." But just as he's about to attack, two people suddenly fall from above, followed by Carnelian jumping down. Looking at this man who disgusts her, Carnelian raises her greatsword. "You bastard, how dare you disrespect Sir Knight?" With those words, she strikes him down, then smiles at Julian saying, "Master, why did you hide your true identity?" The events before him leave Julian confused, so he asks Carnelian what's going on. It turns out these people are human traffickers, and the two were sold to them by the inn owner. When Raspel thanks Julian for saving their lives, just as he's about to explain that he was only lying to deceive the opponent, Carnelian steps on his foot. Looking at Julian, who swallowed his words, Carnelian secretly smiles. "Really now, there's no need to hide it anymore." 2.5 hours later, Julian and Carnelian leave the inn. After the inn owner, sporting a pig-like face, sees them off, Julian thinks Carnelian has changed and no longer kills randomly. But Carnelian says somewhat dejectedly, "I did want to kill him yesterday. The reason she spared his life was because he agreed to free Melquint. But having finally gained freedom, he has nowhere to go, as his homeland was long destroyed, and his people scattered across the lands, so Julian invites him to join them." Carnelian agrees, saying that since knights aren't very capable, having a fairy around would be better. But before leaving, Melquint asks them to wait, as he has something to take care of. 2.5 hours later, Melquint returns as promised, and the three set out on their journey to the royal city. Soon Julian is gasping for breath. while Melquint appears quite relaxed, explaining that among male fairies, his stamina is considered the best. Julian unconsciously nods. But the next second, both Julian and Canelian show surprised expressions. "You're actually male?" So Melquint tells them about his experience of being castrated. He was originally a proper male fairy, but because the lady of the house took a liking to him, the master had him castrated, turning him into a female fairy. But Julian doesn't understand what castration means. Canelian has to explain it with an analogy, frightening Julian so much his hair stands on end. Just as the three arrive at the Lisenbell royal city, ready to start their new lives, Raspel has already become a tearful mess, because he doesn't know how to live without Melquint. Meanwhile, the inn owner is angry about losing Melquint, when suddenly the wall cracks. Then three figures break through. A large foot steps directly onto the owner. "Hey, pig, have you seen Red-Eyed Seal?" When Lai returns to the royal city to report to the emperor. The emperor specifically instructs her to wear a dress for the upcoming ball. If she finds someone she likes at the ball, he would use his royal authority to help arrange the marriage. Dressed up, Lai doesn't look like a knight at all. Looking at the wedding dress-like gown, Lai recalls painful memories. She and Jared should have been married long ago. Lai had even secretly snuck into the room with the wedding dress, looking forward to the moment she would wear it. But the day before the wedding, Icarte suddenly told her that Jared had killed all her family members and then vanished. The painful memories make her lose interest in trying on the dress. She leaves dejectedly. Unexpectedly, she runs into Canelian. Seeing the fairy with Julian, Lai is very curious. Julian quickly introduces Melquint and indicates that she is as reliable a companion as Canelian. Canelian curiously asks Lai if she's going somewhere. Lai tells them she just bought a dress for the ball. Hearing this, Canelian sighs disappointedly. "I can't even wear a dress because I haven't found the right master." Lai immediately offers, "You can all choose one, just put it on my account." Canelian's eyes immediately light up as she grabs Lai's hands. "Thank you so much." But just then, Jared suddenly appears behind Lai. "I wonder if I'll see the blue raptor in a dress at tonight's ball." Lai immediately assumes a battle stance. "How dare you come here?" But Jared calmly pulls out a royal invitation. Lisenbell's hospitality is really poor, drawing swords against invited guests. When she sees the seal on the invitation, Lai recognizes it as Crown Prince Bebelin's personal seal. But why would the Crown Prince invite him? Before Lai can respond, Jared turns away gracefully. "Whatever the case, I'm very much looking forward to tonight's ball. See you then." Then Julian and his companions go to the dress shop. It's his first time wearing such formal attire, and he feels uncomfortable. But Melquint's compliments make him very happy. Melquint also puts on a shining dress, but Canelian still hasn't chosen, so Julian urges her to hurry, or they'll be late. After some fussing around, Canelian finally chooses a dress. "I've chosen this one." On the way to the ball, Julian keeps stealing glances at Canelian, but gets startled when Canelian catches him. Melquint thoughtfully offers to carry Canelian's sword. Julian wants to help, but Canelian dismisses him. "You better not, you probably couldn't last a few minutes." Soon they arrive at the castle. The splendid scenery inside leaves Julian in awe. Just then, two attendants rush over. "Are you the famous knight Julian? Is this beautiful lady your love?" Julian frantically waves his hand, saying no. Canelian quickly introduces herself. "I am Sir Knight's seal." Both are deliberately trying to win Julian over for different princes, and start arguing about it. Just then, Knight Lai appears. "What are you doing?" After scolding the two, she leads the three to the ball. Canelian asks Lai why she isn't wearing a dress, and why the royal atmosphere feels strangely tense. Even the ball attendees are wearing swords. Lai explains helplessly that currently, due to Lisenbell's succession issues, supporters of the Crown Prince and Second Prince are in opposition. It turns out that although the Crown Prince is the legal heir, the Second Prince not only has good character but is also capable in handling state affairs. So many officials choose to follow him. Hearing this, Canelian jokes, "So it's a battle between an incompetent elder brother and a capable younger brother." What a cliché story. The woman has lived for tens of thousands of years but has never opened her eyes. Even more surprisingly, she is the mother of seals. The first Emperor Obenbarha promised her that no matter what, he would bring Jurong before her. But what puzzles her is that the one who awakened Jurong wasn't Tessing. As the mother of seals, you should know who it is. Why do I feel like the whole world is deceiving me? Meanwhile, the ball finally begins. But since Julian doesn't know how to dance, Canelian has to teach him on the spot. To Melquint's beautiful singing, Canelian happily asks, "Do you want to dance too?" Under Canelian's guidance. After 2.5 turns, Julian somehow learns to dance. Though it's your first time, you're not bad at all. Just then, a servant appears breathlessly. Apparently the king is looking for them. Canelian is already eager to receive rewards. "Let's go, my Sir Knight." Meanwhile, Jared, who is wandering around, is suddenly ambushed. His attacker is Knight Lai. "You once tried to defeat Lisenbell, now you casually come to attend the ball. What are you planning?" Jared smiles and says, "I'm not interested in such a small country. You should know why I'm doing this, Karina." But Lai says, "Don't call me that. I am now Knight Lai of Lisenbell, and why did you name your seal after my former name?" Hearing her insist on being Knight Lai, Jared becomes angry. "How long are you going to be a dog? To those fools who put the kingdom in danger, they only hinder you from becoming a greater knight. Just wait and see, you'll know how naive you are." When everyone arrives at the Great Hall, the Emperor expresses gratitude for Julian's help, but Julian says he hasn't really done much. This infuriates Canelian. Fortunately, the king doesn't mind, and even invites him to become a Knight of Lisenbell. Just thinking about becoming a royal knight and getting a mansion and farmland, living a shameless life, makes Canelian very excited. But Julian refuses. Canelian is absolutely furious that he kicked away such good fortune that came knocking, just as the king wants to try persuading him again. The crown prince suddenly stands up. "Your Majesty, pardon my interruption. What Lisenbell needs most now is not excellent knights, but stable royal authority. You must quickly designate an heir." Ministers supporting the second prince also step forward, urging him to quickly determine the heir. Such behavior makes the king very angry. "All of you shut up. How dare you engage in power struggles at an occasion meant to welcome guests? Has greed blinded you so much that you've lost all dignity?" Originally, the king planned to announce the heir sometime later, but announcing the heir at this victory celebration would also be a good choice, and the king designates second Prince Lance as heir. Such a result is unacceptable to the crown prince. He kneels and begs the king to redesignate him as heir, but receives the king's rebuke, who reveals his assassination of political opponents and private army training. "If someone like you sits on the throne, your greed will ultimately lead Lisenbell to destruction." The crown prince, losing all hope, loses his mind, suddenly draws his sword and stabs at his father. Lai immediately rushes to stop him, but being too far away, she can't stop it in time, can only point her sword at the crown prince in frustration. Lai, a royal knight pointing a sword at royalty. Does this seem right? Don't make me doubt your loyalty to the royal family. With that, he raises his sword and shouts, "As the king of Lisenbell, I order you to completely seal off the royal city. Today I will kill all the treacherous ministers who oppose my succession." Then countless soldiers rush in, surrounding everyone present. Jared also appears beside the crown prince. Then the crown prince asks Julian, "If you're willing to follow me, I'll give you wealth and honor beyond imagination." Julian firmly refuses him, because he won't collaborate with someone who killed their own father. Hearing this, the crown prince points his sword at Julian. "What an ungrateful fellow. Lai, kill this guy first." But Lai not only doesn't act, she even throws away her sword and announces her resignation from knighthood. From this moment on, she will no longer follow royal orders, but will protect Lisenbell according to her own will. The crown prince angrily orders his men to kill Lai, but no one moves. They not only fear Lai's great strength, they are even more unwilling to attack such a selfless knight. So the crown prince orders Jared to kill everyone who defies him. But Jared tells him very fiercely, "I only agreed to come to the ball, so don't order me around casually. But thanks to you, Lai finally gave up her knighthood." The change in situation makes Canelian very happy. This way it will be easier to kill this crazy prince. But just then, Melquint senses an ominous presence. When he pushes open the balcony doors, the city before them is already engulfed in flames. Lai immediately orders Akartis to move everyone to safety. But just then, the hall doors suddenly open. The newcomer is Sod, who is hunting Canelian. Lai immediately recognizes him. But what she can't understand is why this Black Cardinal, who has power greater than ordinary kings and only takes orders from the first emperor, would appear here. Fortunately, Sod hasn't seen Canelian, so he orders the king here to see him. The crown prince immediately rushes over, shouting, "I am the king of Lisenbell." A minister quickly steps forward, telling Sade that second Prince Lance is the country's king. Seeing the old king lying in a pool of blood, Sade also understands what happened, so he orders Seal Juliet to release flames, burning the crown prince alive. Then he walks to second Prince Lance. "Now you are the king here. Bring the red-eyed seal before me. This is first Emperor Obenbarha's order. If you can't do it, then I'll kill one by one until I find them." At this point, Canelian finally realizes the danger. Fortunately, Lai steps forward, because she cannot allow Said to kill innocents in Lisenbell. But this suddenly excites Sade, because he is very curious what a female knight's screams sound like. But just one exchange leaves Lai shocked for 2 seconds, because Sade not only didn't draw his sword, but blocked arrows with his arm. It turns out his arm has magic. Each collision's shock makes Lai's arms extremely painful. Sade even mocks Lai, saying there's no need to draw his sword to fight her. Then Seal Juliet and Justin release magic. Under the assault of ice and fire, Lai can only struggle to defend. Sade seizes the opportunity to sneak attack, directly grabbing her throat. "Now let me hear the blue raptor's screams." But the next second, a red light flashes. Jared suddenly strikes and cuts off Sad's arm, and warns him unfriendly, "If you have business with Lai, you should get in line. After all, I've been waiting for so long." Seeing Jared, Sade puts away his contemptuous attitude, drawing his sword directly. Seeing this, Jared also becomes serious, because he had long heard rumors about this sword. Reportedly, no one could block it more than 5 times. But now it looks more like a tool for enhancing magic power. When Sod uses his sword to release magic, the invisible sonic attack causes everyone great pain. Looking at Jared, who appears slightly pained, Sade proudly tells him, "The stronger your attack, the stronger the shock you'll receive. Your entire body will be rejected by the magic." But Jared doesn't believe it, charging straight in. Justin immediately releases ice magic to block. Seeing this, Karina also takes action. Though she shatters the ice magic's defense with one punch, Juliet immediately releases fire magic to defend. Meanwhile, Jared has successfully approached Sade, But his attack is not only easily blocked by Sade, he also receives the shock from the sword's magic. This forces him to quickly retreat away from Sade. At the same time, Juliet and Justin join forces, suppressing Karina. You were very brave just now, but do you have the courage to try again? Blocking my sword brings pain, but if you don't block, you might die painlessly. Choose one. Just then, Lai suddenly appears beside Jared, but even in such a dangerous and tense situation. Jared suddenly asks Lai, after we kill this guy, will you come live in the south with me? Hearing these words, Lai actually blushes a bit. Let's deal with this guy first, then I'll think about it. But while the two are dealing with Sade, Canelian has already pulled Julian, escaping from Lizenbell. Julian feels they should help Lai, but Canelian gets angry. Master, don't meddle in others' affairs, we're not in a position to help others right now. That guy called Sade is looking for me, so running away is helping. If we're caught by the Emperor, we're finished. But these words make Julian very confused. You've been asleep for over 500 years. Why would the Emperor be looking for you? Hearing this, Canelian suddenly becomes somewhat sad. It seems 500 years is still too short, not enough to escape that person's control. Meanwhile, Sade, holding his severed arm, also leaves Lizenbell, continuing to hunt for the red-eyed seal. Juliet asks if he needs reinforcements, but Sade refuses. Hunting those who fled in fear is more interesting. Soon news of the seal's escape reaches the Empire, but Reut, head of Imperial Security, isn't angry and is actually happy. He doesn't plan to let Sade take the credit. His adopted son suggests sending people to ambush at the Pike Mountains, because to escape Obenbara's pursuit, they can only go to Derakart, which isn't under Imperial influence. And the Pike Mountains are on the only route there. Meanwhile, after 2 days of non-stop fleeing, Julian's stamina has reached its limit, and their escape route is indeed towards Derakart. But at their current pace, it would take 2 years to reach. Julian thinks this time is too long. Canelian suddenly asks him, do you know why it takes so long? Because fish schools adjust their speed to match the slowest fish. Julian doesn't understand what this means. Canelian angrily shouts to tell him, it means what should only take a week needs 2 years because of someone who's deadly slow. Julian yells back, I know, then continues walking, but after just 2 meters he stops, since it's going to take 2 years anyway. Can we rest a bit before continuing? Canelian, I really can't walk anymore. Fortunately, with Melquint's persuasion, Canelian finally agrees to rest, but she doesn't want to talk to Julian. Just then, there's a rustling sound nearby. Then a wild boar jumps out. Julian is so scared he hugs Canelian. When he realizes what he's done, he immediately turns away embarrassed. But then there's a rumbling sound nearby. When Julian looks up, 2 tall orcs appear before him. Canelian immediately shields the two, asking what business they have. It turns out they're hunting that beast, and rudely ask Canelian where the beast went. They even contemptuously say, humans are disgusting. This makes Canelian very angry. She directly kicks the orc down with her left leg. I don't care if you hate humans, but why are you taking it out on me? And I'm a seal, got it? How do I look human? You stupid orc who can't even tell a seal from a human. Looking at the violent Canelian, the two are terrified. Just then a human rushes out, shouting for Canelian to stop her brutal treatment of his friends. But when he sees Canelian's breathtaking beauty, he directly slides on his knees before Canelian. My name is Seo. May I ask your beautiful name? This makes Julian very speechless. Did he really come to mediate? Even worse, he directly grabs Canelian's hand. Such a sudden action startles Canelian, who immediately pulls her hand back. Canelian's reaction of hiding behind Julian makes Melquint very surprised. So Lady Canelian becomes more helpless when facing this kind of person. When learning that Julian is Canelian's master, Seo becomes very angry. Shameless fellow, actually treating such a beautiful woman as a slave. Hearing slave makes Canelian very angry, but her angry appearance in Seo's eyes is still so charming, angering Canelian into giving him an uppercut. Looking at the 2 fleeing orcs, Julian laughs awkwardly. From the results, he did save his friends. Should we stop Lady Canelian? We should, but I can't stop her. Why don't you try? The girl slept for 20 years. Everyone thought she would never wake, but the man firmly believed she would wake up, just when the villagers were forcing him to sell the girl. Seo suddenly returns. Whoever dares touch a hair on Amaryllis, I'll make them end up like me. Leto looks puzzled. Son, what's wrong with you? Canelian shows a friendly smile as she sends Seo flying. Nothing much, just some love from a beautiful lady. Seo quickly introduces to everyone. They are guests I met, although this man is unremarkable. The fairy and lady with him are very beautiful. Leto takes the opportunity of greeting guests to send the villagers away. But while they are drinking tea, Canelian tastes that the tea leaves are from Zulihal, that famous vacation destination that disappeared over 100 years ago. This surprises Leto, so he asks if Canelian is a seal. Canelian not only happily confirms but also praises Leto's eyesight as being much better than his son's. But Seo doesn't know what a seal is, even thinking they're no different from slaves, which greatly angers Canelian. His father can only explain to him. A seal is a being who lives to awaken their trainer under the guidance of fate. Hearing this explanation, Seo immediately kneels before Canelian. It seems our meeting was arranged by fate. Let me awaken you. But gets kicked flying by Canelian. I'm already awake, you fool. What puzzles Canelian is why they want to sell that girl. It turns out the orcs near the village often hunt the villagers' trained wild boar Peiji, thus creating conflicts with the villagers. To this, Melquint expresses understanding, because from the orcs' perspective, it's hard to understand that wild boar Peiji belongs to humans. So the villagers called in mercenaries, wanting to subdue the orcs. But the mercenaries keep pressing the village for payment. Therefore, the poor villagers thought of selling Amaryllis. Canelian expresses wanting to see that seal, so under SEO's guidance, everyone comes to Amaryllis's room. But after observing for 2.5 minutes, Canelian says this seal is strange, because even with sleeping seals, she can sense some aura, but she can't sense any aura or power from this child. SEO excitedly says nearby that he will awaken such a pure and delicate Amaryllis no matter what. But Julian solemnly tells him, don't guess her personality before she wakes up. When Canelian was sleeping, I also thought she was pure and delicate. Before he can finish speaking, Canelian comes over. What did you just say? Frightening Julian into silence. Then he says to SEO, you think just anyone can awaken a seal? But SEO points at Julian saying, such a weak person awaken you, why can't I? How dare you look down on my master? Although he's not impressive at all, he did awaken super powerful me. Julian, feeling belittled, holds back his anger. Not daring to look at Canelian, he just turns around and mutters, cooks are also great. But just then, a voice comes. Please tell me your name. Julian is confused. Why say it again? Did you forget my name? Canelian. But Melquint surprisingly tells Julian, it wasn't Lady Canelian who asked, only to see the girl looking at Julian saying, please say my name. The two are completely shocked. What is going on? I'm just a cook, not a powerful knight. But the girl still asks Julian to say her name. SEO suddenly interrupts the girl and tells her your name is Amaryllis. I've been waiting for you to wake up, but is ignored by the girl, who turns back to continue asking Julian her name. This greatly angers SEO. Did you deliberately get close to me just to steal Amaryllis? Seeing this, Julian turns to look at Canelian. Let's run first. With that, he escapes from the bedroom. Canelian quickly follows. Melquint very politely bids farewell to the village chief and leaves too, leaving only the girl continuously mumbling Julian's name. Canelian comforts him. We're already being hunted by First Emperor Odenbara. One more seal won't make much difference. But Julian isn't comforted. Just then, Melquint says he smells alcohol. Julian immediately gets excited. There's nothing a drink can't solve. If there is, then have another. With that, he excitedly rushes toward the tavern. Looking at Julian running away, Canelian tells Melquint a little-known secret. It turns out people misunderstand that only humans can awaken seals. The real key is that only powerful beings who can control seals can manifest seals. But this makes Melquint even more confused. Then what about Master Julian? To this, Canelian believes, powerful must have many meanings. This extremely weak master must have some powerful aspect I don't know about. But when Julian arrives at the tavern, the server tells him there's no more alcohol, because all the alcohol was bought by these mercenaries who are subduing the orcs. Just then, Canelian and Melquint also arrive at the tavern. The mercenaries immediately get excited. Who would have thought such a remote place would have such beautiful ladies and fairies? They even rudely tell Canelian to pour drinks for them, to keep them company, and threaten Julian to leave his companions and quietly get out, or they'll kill him. But Julian not only doesn't leave, instead he directly goes to the mercenary leader, snatches his sword. If you're confident, then try to kill me. The mercenary leader is directly frightened by this aura and falls to the ground, continuously backing away, asking fearfully if Julian is a knight. Julian plays with the short sword and says ominously, you're asking so many questions when you're already dead. After 1 second of contemplation, the mercenary leader decisively flees the tavern and leaves harsh words. Remember this, you punk, we're leaving because we don't want trouble. Julian collapses into a chair. That really scared me. This series of actions truly stuns Canelian. Are you crazy? Why suddenly start bluffing? You've never done this before. Julian smilingly tells her, I just wanted to teach a lesson to people who treat you casually, and before you were always helping me teach others lessons. Hearing these words, Canelian actually blushes, but turns away pretending not to care, saying, what kind of master protects their seal? What a strange person. Just then, the server comes to thank Julian. Thanks to him, they could drive away those freeloaders. To thank him, they bring out good food and drink to treat him. Canelian is also unusually gentle toward him. When the three finish their pleasant meal, Julian packs up, ready to continue toward Derricart. But Canelian changes into the clothes she wore when first discovered, and asks Julian to say her name. Julian tells her to stop joking. Canelian suddenly grabs his hand, urgently asking him to say her name. This phrase keeps appearing in Julian's ears. With a scream, Julian wakes from his dream, but just when he thinks it was just a dream, he finds someone holding his hand. Then he hears the most terrifying words, please say my name. But Julian not only didn't give her a name, he kept avoiding her. This also caused her to remain in a state of contract formation, unable to think. Seeing Julian's awkward appearance, Carnelian couldn't help but want to tease him. How about I go tell her you're here? Julian didn't know what to do anymore, one constantly following him asking for a name, the other looking like she wanted to kill him, telling him to stay away from Amaryllis. But Carnelian thought he should give that seal a name, although this would be unfair to Seal. A seal who awakens without forming a contract could likely face danger. And finally, Julian revealed the reason for his avoidance. Because I'm your master, hasn't your power weakened? I don't want to make other seals unfortunate as well. Hearing this, Carnelian fell silent. She hugged Julian and gently comforted him. Even if you have the strongest master in the world, it doesn't mean that Seal would be happy. Undeniably, meeting a very weak master seems to have a high probability of becoming unfortunate. But before Carnelian could finish speaking, Julian pushed her away, so I must escape now. Having said that, he quickly prepared to find another hiding place. WZO Carnelian smiled and continued, I haven't become unfortunate, master. Just as Carnelian worried, Amaryllis was now lost in the forest, and was discovered by a group of mercenaries. Seeing that she was quite pretty, they planned to capture her and sell her for money. But seeing that the newcomer wasn't Julian, Amaryllis simply turned and left. This also confirmed to the mercenaries that this woman was mentally unstable. She didn't even know how to resist, so they developed evil intentions toward her. Meanwhile, Julian was still looking for a place to hide, when Seo suddenly appeared, questioning him about where he had hidden Amaryllis. Julian quickly denied it, saying he had been hiding from her for a day already. This made Seo somewhat distraught, as he hadn't seen Amaryllis for a day. Looking at Seo, who didn't understand the situation, Carnelian told him, once a seal recognizes a master, even if you search for her, she won't hear what you say. But Seo said, so what? I don't know what a seal is, nor do I know what will happen to Amaryllis in the future. But there's one thing I'm certain of, which is that I will do my best for the being I like. Even if I get hurt, I don't mind. After saying this, he turned and left to search for Amaryllis. Carnelian shrugged helplessly. I didn't expect there would be another person here who makes me feel as depressed as you. But just as she finished speaking, she heard Julian saying he would go find Amaryllis together. What will you do after finding her? Of course, return her to Seo, and then I'll continue running away. Hearing this, Melquint suddenly appeared. So we don't need to hide anymore, right? Meanwhile, Seo discovered a line of footprints. He hurriedly followed the footprints, and soon caught up with the mercenaries. And the mercenaries were about to harm Amaryllis. So Seo immediately ambushed one of the mercenaries, and shouted angrily for those bastards to stop. The bald man immediately ordered his subordinates to teach him a lesson. The subordinate cursed as he walked towards Seo. Unexpectedly, Seo suddenly struck, cleaving his skull with one sword strike. This act of dying due to excessive talking greatly angered the bald man. He directly ordered his subordinates to attack together. But Seo, with his agile movements practiced for 2 years, not only easily dealt with the subordinates, but also beat the bald man until he sat on the ground begging for mercy. But Seo didn't intend to let him off so easily. He couldn't tolerate them wanting to do such despicable things to a sealed. But just then, he was stabbed through the chest from behind, and the bald man stood up again. It's because you don't know your own limits. That's why you'll die so early. After saying this, he repeatedly stabbed Seo, then shouted at the subordinates lying on the ground, stop pretending to be dead, get up. Seo, not yet completely dead, trembled as he crawled towards Amaryllis. What a funny guy. You're dying and still trying to show off in front of a woman. After saying this, he threw Seo next to Amaryllis. Now you can watch what happens to the person you like. But just then, something miraculous happened. Amaryllis turned her head and spoke to Seo, although Seo had imagined countless times what she would look like speaking to him. At this moment, he couldn't hear any sound, nor could he make a sound. Just then, Julian and the others finally found this place. Melquint immediately saw the dying Seo. Julian shouted, what have you all done? And the mercenaries recognized Julian at a glance. Boss, this guy is the one who tried to kill us yesterday. But before they could move to cut off Julian's head, Carnelian swung her great sword, instantly killing all the little thugs. Although I don't want to help Seo, but you people really deserve to die. This terrifying combat power frightened the mercenaries. They immediately turned and fled. Carnelian wanted to chase and kill them, but was stopped by Julian, who begged her to use magic to save Seo. But Carnelian had no way, because he had been stabbed many times in the chest and was beyond saving. And her own abilities were only destruction and slaughter. She had no talent in saving people. But just when Julian felt utterly desperate, a pair of pure white hands were placed on Seo's chest. Because Amaryllis had a magical ability. As long as she placed her hands on the chest, even a dying person could be revived. After waking up, Seo was puzzled. Though his life had been worth it, how did he come back to life? When he saw the smiling Amaryllis, he asked if she had saved him. But Amaryllis didn't answer him. Instead, she said something that shocked Carnelian. Please tell me your name. She was extremely shocked because the seal's contract binding object had changed. Hearing her actually speaking to him, Seo happily introduced himself. Amaryllis looked at him expectantly. Now please say my name. Seo took her small hand and gently said, you are Amaryllis. Then Lord Seo, from now on you are my tamer, I will serve you well. Hearing this, Seo was deeply moved. Excitedly, he hugged Amaryllis. Being able to see your smile makes my whole life worth the seal. This made Carnelian exclaim it was too cheesy. Then she marveled at how amazing Amaryllis's ability was. That she could save a dying person, which made Julian curious if she was more powerful than you. The ability to burn people to ashes, and the ability to create people from ashes. Which do you think is more powerful? But Amaryllis seems to be in her first awakening. It's really enviable. Because she has no past, she can live very happily. Knowing too much is also a kind of trouble. Julian was very confused. So what exactly do you know? That I am a seal who knows I'm a chef, but I'm still very happy being with you. Minu Seal, the escaped bald man, suddenly let out a lewd laugh. After calming down, he finally realized who that woman was. But his subordinate said he had never seen such a terrifying woman. You fool, she is the red-eyed seal being hunted throughout the Hesperia territory. Even just reporting would earn a huge reward. Now we can not only make money, but also get revenge. They are done for. At this moment, Julian, completely unaware, was troubled by an ingredient. As a chef, he actually didn't know how to use it. This also earned mockery from SEO, but as a chef from a small fishing village, Julian could only angrily say he was good at cooking fish. Looking at the two bickering, Carnelian was also very happy, because she hadn't been this relaxed for a long time. But the next second, Carnelian became serious again. Now is not the time to be joking around here. Just then, Amaryllis suddenly asked her, what is the purpose of Seal's creation? It turned out Amaryllis had forgotten about her birth. But Carnelian said she couldn't tell her because of some rules, and it was better that she forgot. Don't worry about those things. Just live happily each day. Although your master, who is like an idiot, will die someday, you have to carry these memories and continue living. Hearing that SEO would die, Amaryllis suddenly cried out. Carnelian quickly comforted her, saying it wouldn't happen immediately. Just then, Seo came over. Amaryllis immediately nervously said, Lady Carnelian said you will die someday, before she could continue. Seo put his finger on her lips. That won't happen, Amaryllis. I couldn't possibly leave you. This mushy scene made Carnelian shudder. Just then, the village chief returned, dejected. It turned out that the village had just held a meeting. The villagers insisted on going to subdue the orcs, because they felt that if orcs attacked wild boars, they might also attack the village. But SEO firmly believed that orcs were a proud race. As long as their territory wasn't invaded, they would absolutely not attack the village. Though the village chief agreed with his opinion, making fearful villagers understand the other side, they would still prefer to make the other side submit. Frightened people will take up knives, brave people will extend their hands. Someday you will understand this truth. But SEO didn't give up, and decided to be the one who extends a hand. He planned to visit the orc village. The village chief thought he should rest more as he had just been injured. But SEO said with Amaryllis around, he was completely fine. The village chief sighed with relief, and indicated that he would also try to persuade the villagers. The next day, SEO invited Julian and the others to go with him, which annoyed Carnelian quite a bit. But she still quietly reminded Julian, our current situation doesn't allow us to wander around so freely. Julian expressed concern that the mercenaries might come back for revenge, and said they would run away after helping this once. Carnelian could only reluctantly agree. Soon everyone arrived at the orc village. Looking at the warlike orcs, Julian couldn't help but remark that they were completely different from the orcs he had seen in the city. Melquint told him that enslaved races are bound by a sense of powerlessness. When everyone arrived at the orc leader's tent, they finally met their leader. Long time no see, SEO. She never expected that humans, who usually treat seals as playthings, would treat a seal as a lover, and even request the orc chief to bestow the blessing of the land upon her. This action stunned Carnelian and the others. After all, Amaryllis was still a sea-sealed. The orc chief reminded him that seals couldn't be lovers. That way, they couldn't reproduce. But SEO didn't care. After Amaryllis received the blessing, the chief wanted to discuss returning Nate with SEO. But SEO said he didn't want Nate back, and came to apologize for the villagers' impolite attitude. This surprised the chief. Then she looked toward Carnelian and said, although I am hundreds of years younger than this seal, I have lived for a long time. This is the first time I've received an apology from a human. Hearing this, SEO directly walked toward the chief and extended his hand. I hope we can coexist peacefully as before. Because my father said fearful people take up knives, brave people extend their hands. Julian quickly whispered in his ear, that phrase doesn't literally mean extending your hand. Just then, the chief suddenly said, are you that seal's tamer? It's really strange. You don't look particularly strong. How did you form a contract with that seal? Julian awkwardly said he wasn't sure either, but he could confirm that he wasn't currently a helpful tamer for Carnelian. The chief was speechless, but asked if he regretted forming a contract with Carnelian. Julian indicated he couldn't easily answer this question, but he hoped that when asked this question again 2.5 years later, he could answer with no regrets at all, and for this he would do his utmost. These words shocked Carnelian. Is this still that weak, Julian? Looking at the two humans who were striving for seals, the chief also decided to put aside her prejudice against humans. Although she still couldn't understand the concept of who Nate belonged to, she was willing to make an effort for it. SEO excitedly grabbed his hand, very excitedly praising the chief as a brave orc. But just then, a guard rushed in anxiously. It turned out that the human army had controlled the entire village, binding all the villagers. SEO was shocked, suspecting the mercenaries had returned for revenge. But actually, the army belonged to Reut, the head of the Imperial Security Department, because she didn't intend to let Saeed steal the merit. After receiving news of the red-eyed seal, she immediately dispatched troops to control the village. Seal quickly bid farewell to the chief. Carnelian and Julian also decided to leave together. Watching the departing group, the chief decided to be a brave person and actively extend a hand to humans. At this moment, the commander was interrogating the village head about the whereabouts of the red-eyed seal, but he said he had never seen one. The bald man warned him not to pretend. He had seen the red-eyed seal with his own eyes. But the village head still insisted he had never seen such a seal. The commander grabbed him and exposed his lie. If he didn't hand over the seal, he would kill the villagers one by one. The bald man excitedly pointed his sword at a villager. To save the innocent villagers, the village head had to reveal Carnelian's whereabouts. Having gotten the answer he wanted, the commander told the bald man to release the frightened villager, and had him lead the way to the orc village. But everyone else was to be killed. Just as the bald man excitedly prepared to kill the village head, his sword suddenly broke. Then he was immediately cut in half by Carnelian. My cursed popularity, everywhere I go there's a bunch of men chasing after me. The commander didn't expect her to deliver herself, and alone, but Carnelian said, I'm not fighting alone. The next second, the sound of hooves was heard from afar. A group of orc warriors instantly charged in. With the addition of many orcs, the army was quickly defeated. SEO and the others finally returned, releasing the bound village head and villagers. Seeing the commander trying to escape, Carnelian smiled. Do you think you can escape from my hands? But just as she was about to kill the commander, a black shadow suddenly appeared and repelled her. Carnelian was shocked. What is that blob? Carnelian thought the opponent was too clumsy and would definitely move slowly. But the opponent suddenly disappeared and flashed to her side. Carnelian hurriedly blocked with her sword, sliding back 2 meters before finally stopping. The opponent's speed was beyond her belief. The commander triumphantly told her this was a heavy infantry soldier enhanced by magic, who could forcibly break through physical limits under magical enhancement. Although they would die soon, they were more than enough to kill seals or knights. Then Carnelian was surrounded by heavy infantry. She immediately realized things were going badly, because there were heavy infantry heading towards Julian. Orc warriors tried to stop the heavy infantry, but were killed with one slash. Then they walked towards Julian. At this moment, Carnelian was fighting with the heavy infantry. She couldn't save him, just as she was distracted for a moment. She was directly hit by the heavy infantry. The heavy infantry swarmed in. In the critical moment, Carnelian unleashed all her power. Then a surge of lightning power spread out. But it only pushed the heavy infantry back 2.5 steps, and Carnelian also became weak. Seeing the heavy infantry unharmed at all, Carnelian had to change her attack target, first dealing with the mages controlling the heavy infantry. But at this time, Julian was in even more danger. Carnelian had to desperately run towards Julian, but was again blocked by heavy infantry. Although she desperately dealt with one, more heavy infantry soon came forward to block her. Carnelian also suffered serious injuries. Damn it. I couldn't protect my master again. But just as the heavy infantry was about to kill Julian and Carnelian, the sky suddenly darkened. Then a lightning bolt struck down, hitting a heavy infantry soldier holding a lightning rod. As lightning continued to fall, the heavy infantry fell one after another. Carnelian turned her head searching. She was very curious who had used such strong magic. Finally, she discovered a figure emitting electricity in the distance. When everyone looked at him, they all showed extremely shocked expressions. This person was none other than the village chief Leto. It turned out that the village chief was actually a high-level mage. But before everyone could breathe a sigh of relief, Melquint sensed a dangerous aura. Then a fireball descended from the sky. Fortunately, Carnelian blocked the attack. When the flames dispersed, 3 figures slowly appeared. The newcomers were Sayed, who was pursuing Carnelian. The commander excitedly told him, except for the village chief, who was a mage, and the red-eyed seal, the others were nothing special. But just as he was proudly seeking credit from Sayed, he was directly frozen into an ice sculpture by Justin. I will definitely relay your merits to the Emperor. After saying this, he shattered the commander. The mages beside were shocked, screaming as they scattered. But before they could run 2 meters, they were all frozen into ice sculptures. Then Juliet released fire magic, instantly turning all the mages to ashes. This terrifying battle power put immense pressure on Carnelian. I finally caught you, red-eyed seal. The moment he saw Sayed, Julian immediately asked what he had done to Lay. She wasn't much, but her screams were worth hearing. It sounds quite exciting. Carnelian suddenly stood in front of Julian. You don't look like you've won easily. You must have had a very difficult journey. Hearing this, Said's face immediately darkened. He directly ordered the 2 seals to attack, kill all the interfering people. In the critical moment, the village chief acted again. But even with his best defense, he could only protect Carnelian and SEO's group. The orcs and other villagers were mercilessly eliminated. This was unacceptable to SEO, so he rushed out of the protective shield, attacking towards Said. However, Said only used the simplest sword draw and directly defeated SEO. Just as he was about to finish SEO with 1 sword, Amaryllis suddenly appeared, taking the blow for him. Seeing the fallen Amaryllis, Julian and Carnelian were utterly shocked. SEO paid a terrible price for his overconfidence. He completely broke down, but no matter how much he called out, Amaryllis wouldn't wake up. His hysterical cries made Said even more excited. So this is all you're capable of. Mean as Seal, Julian was also imperceptibly changing. At this moment, he was extremely angry and established a connection with Carnelian. At the same time, Carnelian's power was also enhanced. This is the first time I've truly felt my master's emotions. After saying this, Carnelian went to attack Said. Finally, just as Said was about to kill SEO, she repelled Said in time. Carnelian pressed her advantage. Said swung his sword, easily blocking, and mocked Carnelian for coming to die. Carnelian angrily stated, "Today I'm going to cut your damned sword and you into pieces." With each of Carnelian's attacks, Said's sword actually began to crack. Carnelian seized the opportunity, striking Said directly from the front. Said also tried to kill Carnelian, but was quickly dodged by her. "You're not that powerful either." Said couldn't understand why Carnelian, who should have weakened after fighting, was still so strong. Just then he noticed Julian in the distance. The current Julian was emitting a very special aura. Said immediately understood, so it's because of him. So he immediately ordered the two seals, "Kill that tamer." Upon receiving the order, the two immediately released ice and fire magic towards Julian. Seeing the magic about to hit Julian, Carnelian was alarmed, but it was too late to save him. In the critical moment, the old village chief acted again, blocking the fatal strike. However, this sudden change interrupted the connection between Julian and Carnelian. Said also took the opportunity to attack Carnelian. "Are you worried about your tamer? Where did your momentum go?" Carnelian directly launched an attack. However, after exchanging blows again, Carnelian clearly felt her power weaken. But Said also knew that the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for him. So he unleashed all his power, soon suppressing Carnelian. Seeing her struggling, Said couldn't help but get excited. "Your expression now is really good to see." But Carnelian suddenly smiled, because the two seals, Juliet and Justin, were now unable to use their power. Hearing this, Said's face darkened. "Do you know what's the best thing about seals? That is, no matter what command the master gives, seals cannot refuse." Said's words confused Carnelian. The next second, Said suddenly laughed perversely, even if it means sacrificing their lives. Hearing this, Carnelian was shocked. "What are you going to do?" And on the other side, Juliet suddenly erupted, instantly suppressing the village chief. Then Justin suddenly appeared, grabbing the village chief's hands, not only interrupting his magic, but also using ice magic to freeze his hands. The village chief was shocked. He had already guessed that Justin was planning to perish together with him. Indeed, nearby Juliet had now completed the preparation for the killing magic, but he hesitated. After struggling for 2 seconds, he still launched the fatal strike, but it missed. The violent explosion blew the village chief and Justin away, and it was because of Juliet's moment of hesitation that gave the village chief a terrible suspicion. When Said was about to issue orders again, he suddenly felt the connection between him and the seals weakening, with the possibility of losing control at any moment. So he immediately ordered, "They must kill him before the opponent recovers, even if it means draining all energy." The two were shocked when they received the order, but after hesitating briefly, they still raised their hands, performing the strongest combination technique, ice and fire dual heavens. At this time, one of the village chief's arms was already immobile. He seemed about to be engulfed by the magic attack, but the village chief was completely calm. The next second, magic light began to radiate from his body, and magical butterflies scattered. The village chief raised his only remaining arm. The butterflies flew toward Seal's attack, directly neutralizing the incoming magic, and the two who had exhausted their energy also fainted. Seeing this, Said also stopped fighting, knowing he could no longer achieve his goal today. Just then, the village chief suddenly asked, "These two Sealdren, are they human?" That girl hesitated when attacking the boy. "This is a situation that wouldn't occur when seals receive orders from a skilled knight like you. Haha, truly failed creations. I've dissected countless seals and found they're no different from humans. If there's no difference between humans and seals, then humans can certainly be modified into seals, right? Damn you, you actually pieced together two Sealdren into seals." Fortunately, with Carnelian and the village chief, it forced Said to temporarily retreat. The village chief, who had been holding out all along, finally couldn't hold on anymore. But even with his serious injuries, he still told Carnelian not to worry about him, but to help the injured villagers. When everything was over, Julian hid on the mountaintop. Recalling the brutality of this battle, he became more determined to become stronger. Just then, Carnelian suddenly appeared, asking him how he had achieved resonance with her. But Julian didn't know either. Seeing the dejected Julian, Carnelian quickly comforted him, although this was just a coincidence. "But when you wanted to kill Said, you did resonate with me, and I instantly regained some power because of it, because tamers and seals can share feelings. If you could become a knight who perfectly controls resonance, then we could share the same emotions. That way, I would become your eyes, your sword, and your heart." However, after saying this, Carnelian sadly flipped her hair, because she knew this was impossible to achieve. When Carnelian visited the village chief, she asked him how he would deal with these two abandoned Sealdren. The village chief happily indicated he wanted to adopt them. This shocked Carnelian, because although they looked cute, they could destroy the village without effort. But the village chief said everyone makes mistakes sometimes. He was very fortunate to have met a good mentor who guided him onto the right path. Now he also wanted to guide these two Sealdren onto the right path. And he had promised his late wife not to use magic again. This time he only used it because he had no choice. It was also because of this promise that Seo knew nothing about magic. Carnelian sighed disappointedly because she had planned to invite the village chief to join them. After all, their team of 3 was simply hopeless in terms of combat power. Just then, the village chief asked Carnelian if she was being pursued by the emperor. But Carnelian proudly pointed upward. If you're referring to the emperor of Hespaspace, you're wrong. The person pursuing me has an even higher status. That person is the first emperor, Oben Baha. When the 3 prepared to leave, the village chief suddenly called them back, because he guessed that all routes through the Olympic Mountains probably had ambushes, and suggested they go to Blackwest Mountain, where his mentor Theseus was, believing his mentor would certainly help them find a good solution. After saying this, he took out a necklace and gave it to Carnelian. With it, they could find Theseus, and Seo would guide them. Looking at the energetic Seo, Julian was very surprised. Are you really leaving the village? Seo confirmed, saying he wanted to go out and see the broader world. Then tell Amaryllis everything he had seen and heard. Compared to the happy Julian, Carnelian sighed again helplessly because another burden had been added to the team. After saying goodbye to the village chief, the 4 finally began their new journey. At this time, everyone had reached Blackwest Mountain, but they were lost. What made them more uneasy was Melquint sensed that all life forms around had disappeared. The surroundings were deathly silent. Just then, Carnelian sensed a powerful presence approaching them. Everyone immediately became alert. But the next second, a girl suddenly crashed into Julian's arms. Looking at the weak girl, Seo was very jealous, then asked Carnelian, "Is this the powerful presence you mentioned?" Carnelian had to say she might have been mistaken. Suddenly, the girl shouted for them to run quickly. She was being hunted by the forest guardian Marek. Carnelian very cautiously asked her why. The girl apologetically indicated she couldn't say. Seo was very angry, blaming Carnelian for being unfriendly to a fragile lady. But before he could finish, Carnelian shouted for everyone to be careful. She hadn't made a mistake. That powerful presence was approaching. The next second, a giant hand appeared in the sky. Then Sentinel Marek appeared before everyone. However, in Carnelian's eyes, the so-called Sentinel was just an evil spirit. So Carnelian asked him why he was hunting the girl. Marek indicated that trespassing and relieving pressure anywhere were punishable offenses. And I'm not an evil spirit. About being called an evil spirit. Marek was very angry. Carnelian suddenly pointed at Melquint. This one is also often misunderstood, so you can exchange experiences with him. Hearing this, Marek was very puzzled. What could be misunderstood about a beautiful fairy? Melquint very shyly said, "Actually, I'm male." Marek, who had been somewhat attracted, instantly felt the world had lost its light. Carnelian said impatiently, "See? Besides you, there are many other poor souls who are misunderstood, so stop being a nuisance, you evil spirit." Being called an evil spirit again, Marek couldn't stand it anymore, swinging his weapon at Carnelian. "I told you not to call me an evil spirit again." Just then, the necklace from the village chief emitted a dazzling light. Marek also recognized this as an item belonging to Lord Theseus. Hearing Marek mention Theseus's name, Carnelian immediately said they were here to find him, and asked Marek to put away his weapon and take them to Theseus. But although Marek stopped attacking, he planned to leave directly. After all, he had no obligation to guide Carnelian. After saying this, he disappeared on the spot. That stinky evil spirit, next time I meet him, he's dead. The girl beside them looked utterly disbelieving. You actually persuaded Marek. Carnelian indicated it was thanks to the necklace, which saved them from a troublesome battle. Theseus was truly no ordinary person, and the girl indicated they were also extraordinary. After expressing her gratitude to everyone, the girl was about to leave, because the Sealdrin were waiting for her. Hearing about Sealdrin, Seo instantly became confused. He didn't understand why the beautiful lady was especially close to Julian, and actually had a sea sealed. But the next second, he called for everyone to chase after the girl. Because it sounded like she knew Theseus, following her would certainly lead to the village. Indeed, 2.5 hours later, everyone made an amazing discovery. Deep in the forest there was actually a very large city hidden, and this was Theseus City.